guys. So we will be looking at the things you need to do before you perform your magnetic particle testing, your NPI or NT as it is usually called. Lots of times we've seen cases where personnel they go to the field and they started doing the job and a level 3 comes or a 20 comes and starts asking certain questions and they get into trouble. So we'll just briefly look at some of the things that you need to do before you start doing your MT testing. Now, the requirements may not need you to do all this, and especially when you are working in certain conditions, you may not need to check certain things. But what should guide what you ultimately should do, which is the first step, is your procedure. So that is why the first thing you need to do is to read your procedure or check the job requirements before you start the job. Something as simple as AC or DC can make a lot of difference in the job. As we will see when we start doing the practical, the magnets we'll be using, the yoke we'll be using, has the capacity to do both AC and DC. So you need to determine if you are using DC for the job or if you are using AC. You also need to check your magnetization pattern and a whole lot of other things, which should be clearly stated in your procedure. Then you need to check if I'm doing, let's say, I'm working in a shop, a machine shop or a fabrication shop where I am constantly doing MPI daily, every time. I may not need to perform some of these things continuously. Some I could just need to do them at the beginning of the shift or the beginning of the day. Some I can do it weekly. But what should ultimately guide what you should check before you do your job should be your procedure or the job requirements. So that is the first one. The second thing you need to do is to check your lighting condition. This room where I'm producing this video now, it may look bright to me, but surprisingly, if you check the intensity, if you check the light intensity of this room, it may not meet the requirements to perform NPI. But one thing is clear for sure, if you are working in under atmospheric light, your normal lighting condition, your light is not subdued during normal daylight, bright daylight. Your bright daylight meets the requirement for your light intensity. So you always need to check your light intensity. Actually, sometimes you are working inside a confined space, inside a tank, or where you have very subdued light. You need to check the intensity if it is good enough, because you can miss out on certain defects if you don't have the right light intensity. So as per requirement for ASME is ASTM, your visible light intensity should not be less than 1000 lux or 100 foot candle. Always remember 1100 lux candle for ASME ASTM, ASME ASTM, that's the American standard. For fluorescent is 1000 microwatt per centimeter square. But when you get to ISO, the only difference is that for your visible light, it should not be less than 500 lux. So you need to check that. How do you check that? You use your light meter, your photometer, to check if it meets the minimum requirement. So the question you now ask, what if I check, let's say I'm doing NPI in this room, and the lighting condition I check is not enough? What do I do? It means you need to bring in more light. You can bring in a searchlight, or you can get a very powerful handheld torch to illuminate the item you are testing. In such a case, you need to point the torchlight or whatever source of lighting, and also check if intensity has improved. The next thing we are going to do is to check the strength of your, depending on what you are using. If you are using a yoke, you are using a prod, or you are using a permanent magnet, you need to check their intensity. For prod, you don't necessarily need to check it because they are usually lightweight. But for your yoke, you must check it, and you normally use a dead weight. So your yoke should be able to lift a dead weight that is about 10 pounds. 10 pounds is about 4.5 kg. You should be able to lift that 10 pounds block. If you are using your permanent magnets, let's say PM, you should be able to lift a load of 40 pounds. That is about 18 kg. You need to check this. Why is this important? Especially for permanent magnets. Some magnets over time, after aging or even at high temperature, when they get to what we call their curing temperature, they may lose their magnetism. So you need to check if the strength of your source of magnetism is good enough. So the question is, if it is not good enough, what do I do? Do not use that magnet. There is no solution to that because the magnet is already bad. For AC yoke, it could be as a result of maybe very low current. The current condition may not be good enough. You will have to check your current. If the current is good enough, but the yoke is not able to lift that 4.5 kg dead weight, it means you should replace that yoke. The next thing you are going to do is to check the magnetic field intensity and direction. You can use either your Bookman Castro strip. You can use what we call our pi gauge, or you can use what we call the shims. For this video, I will show two of it. But the shim is also similar to your pi gauge. Then for those that are using coil and bench units, you need to check the current. Check the setting of your current. If you are using an API bench unit, you need to check your current setting if you are using the right current that you have calculated, because for those you need to calculate your current and adjust the current to the right current. Check it that you are at the right current before you start doing the job. So let's just practicalize some of them. That will practicalize some of these points that we have talked about now. So here we have our light meter. This is our light meter for visible light. So the first thing we are supposed to do is to check for the light intensity. So I put it on. So while it's still covered, I put it on. And you make sure you zero it first. So it's at 0. By the time I open this is what exposes the light. If you look at it, we are getting about 177, around 177 to 200 and something plus loss. What it basically tells us is this intensity of light in this room is not enough to perform MPI as per the requirement. Even for ISO said you should get 500 loss. So this is an issue. So in typical work condition, as bright as this room is looking like as it is now, the lighting condition is still not enough to perform the MPI. So what do we need to do? In a situation where we have this light here, we can put on additional lights if we are doing tests around this area and recheck the intensity to ensure that the intensity is enough before we start performing work at this point. But with this intensity, this is not acceptable to perform your MPI test. If I take it close to another light, now if I check it with my normal atmospheric light, you can see what I'm getting here now is 1640, 1899, 1009. So basically with our normal atmospheric light, we are getting this thing way above our 1000 loss that is required. So you need to consider that when you are performing the test. In the case of our UV light, normally this is our UV light. This is our UV light meter. So definitely we are going to turn off the normal light, wait for like 10 minutes for the room to get acclimatized to the UV light before we perform the light check. So let's say we wait for 10 minutes, we check the intensity with this. and we'll see what we are getting. I don't know if it is clear enough in the video, but you can see I'm getting about 500 and something microwatt per centimeter square, which is not good enough. We have not waited for 10 minutes, so the intensity of the light is not bright enough. But if you wait, so now after waiting for 10 minutes, now we are getting 1004, 1005, 1006 within that range. You see now we are getting intensity that is greater than 1000 microwatt per centimeter square for the fluorescent light. So which means this handheld fluorescent light is good enough for the work we are to do with the MPI. So, so basically, we have checked the intensity of this light. For modern day handheld lights like this, is unlike the olden days that usually uses your incandescent bulb. These days they come with LED and internally built battery. So before you use systems like this, though you can plug it directly to your source of electricity, you can also as well use it with the inbuilt battery. But one thing that can be an issue, you need to ensure that the battery is fully charged, is properly charged, because if the intensity is low, because as you can see, when I disconnect this, it will still work. You can see it's still working. You can see it's still working. But if the battery is not fully charged, it can become an issue. So you need to ensure that the battery is fully charged before you use it. Or as the battery power drops, so will your intensity, so that you don't get yourself into trouble. The next thing we are supposed to do after that is to check for our magnetic field strength. In this case, we are using the yoke. Fortunately enough, this yoke has the capacity to do AC and DC. So if your procedure says you should use AC, use AC. If your procedure says you use DC yoke, use a DC yoke. And you can also increase the current from 0 to maximum. So we are trying to check the intensity of this DC block. This is a 4.5 kg block, to see if this yoke, the strength is good enough for us to use it to perform MPI. So what you see here is to use it to lift it. You see, so it has lifted the block. It shows that the strength of this AC yoke is good enough. If you turn it on DC, it's just similar on, you lift. If it's able to lift it, it means the strength is good enough for your test. The next thing you need to check is your field intensity and direction. You normally can use any of these two. This is a pi gauge and this is a Bowman cathode strip. You just need one. So to illustrate the pi gauge, if you look at this end, you will see there are some sectors with thin lines. These are representing the crack. So this is what you should see visually. Whatever you are seeing at the front here is the same thing that is at the back in this copper foil that is used on this surface. But we are not going to see it until you check. We remember our concept of magnetism. If our magnetic field is going straight, just like this line, if I put my if I have a crack that is parallel to the direction of my magnetic field, I am not going to see that particular crack. So which means if I place this AC yoke and I have this straight one, this one that is horizontally straight, and I place it here, just to check for my feet direction, you will see that I'm not going to see this straight one. So just to put that to the test, we are going to put our our contrast paints, just a little spray of it on this copper end. Looking too much, but let's see. Just a few seconds for it to dry up. Pause. So, if I put now, you can see, from what I see here now, I can see the ones that are diagonal, but I cannot see the straight one. If you look at it, now, this is just to illustrate, but if you are doing a test on a material, if this is the material you are working on, you need to put the pi gauge on the material that you are working on. But this one was just to illustrate so that you see the direction. You can see the black. You can see the black here. You can see the lines are showing, which matches with the lines that we have here. Normally, when it's not magnetized, you are not going to see all these lines, as we saw initially with the copper. So whatever material I'm going to test, I'm just using this block to illustrate. If I have a weld or anything I'm testing on, I will now put this on the surface so that I will understand the direction that my feed is going. So if this were to be a material that I'm testing and I put this, obviously if I put the magnet like this and I have a crack that is straight like this, because the crack is parallel to the direction of the magnetic field, I am not going to see the crack. So what do I need to do? It means I will have to keep it in the perpendicular direction. The same concept applies to the Bowman cathode strip. We have some strips of lines that are here that are vertical that you are not going to see. Visually looking at it, you are not going to see them. You are not going to see any line. But if I put my just to illustrate, so let's say this is the material. So if I spray, you start looking for it. If you look at what is happening here, you are not going to see any crack, you are not going to see anything. Reason being that the feed of the magnet is parallel to the lines. But now if I turn this, if I turn it, you will now see the lines. You can see the lines coming out now. That goes to confirm that the direction of the feed must be perpendicular to the direction of the indication you are trying to get. You can see the lines. But if I turn it perpendicularly, it's because it's already shown before. Now, if I put the black again, if I put the black, you are not going to see anything. Nothing is going to be seen because it is parallel to it. But if I even twist it even at an angle, you see that it start coming out. So that way you are able to, so you put it on the material you are trying to test and you check for the feed direction. But you can still test it outside of the material, but when I did it the first time, this is not a magnetic material, so it's not transmitting so much, but you can still see the effect on the pi gauge. But put it on the material you're testing on and check for the direction of the feed. So now we can illustrate that not only is the strength of this magnet okay, but the feed direction is clearly shown. So these are just some of the checks you need to do before you perform your NPI. Take note, these tests are specific to the job requirement and your procedure. This is just a general illustration so that we can learn. Also, do not use your hand like me. Keep it safe. Thank you.